What's up? It's Matt. It's vacation time. No longer. I am back in the studio. I've got an expert on here, Mr. Jim Taylor. When I come back, we're going to talk about some things with regards to your labor, your staffing, and then running your restaurant at a much higher level. Jim, my friend from north of the border, tell everybody who you are and where you're coming from.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, how you doing? Thanks for having me. Jim Taylor is my name. Yeah. We're a company called BenchmarkSixty. We do you know what? It's kind of funny because we try to explain this in a few different ways, but the most simple way that we could put this is we help restaurants understand information better. So we help them look at all of that data that exists and all the different pieces of information that are out there, all the different kinds of, think about the tech stack that everybody's added to their restaurant in the last few years, right? So we kind of bridge the gap. We help them understand how to use that and turn it into better strategy.
Love it. And you're based out of Vancouver, but you guys work nationwide, worldwide, or?
Yeah, worldwide, actually. We just had a little celebration the other day, looks like we're going to start our first client in Europe, actually. So, nice. But yeah, all over Canada and the US for sure.
Cool. How long in the business?
Well, whole life in restaurants pretty much. But in this business, just over 2 years.
Okay. What started it? Was the pandemic what pushed you into this?
You know what? It's funny. I mean, I'm actually incredibly proud of the fact that the business started by accident.
Okay.
It wasn't intentionally something that was planned. I was in the whole corporate world of restaurants for a long time, right? I had the climb the ladder with one company for 20 years, sort of hospitality career, and pandemic happened, and friends and former colleagues and all these people you're seeing restaurants just have a really tough go, right? As everybody knows. We don't need to dwell on that, but just wanted to help and wanted to make an impact, and thought I had some good ideas and ways to do that. So I left my corporate career with essentially no idea how I was going to do it, but just kind of an urge to help, and sort of organically just started sort of by accident, became a consultant, and then we built the brand around that. So it's kind of been a really cool, fun process over the last few years growing, and now we're working with hundreds of restaurants all over North America.
I love it. And you're near and dear to my heart because tech stack, data. I was talking from a marketing side. I was talking to a guy named Sean Walchef about this in a podcast we did a few weeks ago, and when he was here in town, and I was telling him a story about this restaurant that we had just started dealing with. And in the onboarding process, our tech team kind of dissects where things are coming and going. And I just had a simple question. A guy said, "Hey, I'm looking at your website, you're catering, and there's a Gmail account for catering." It's like, yeah, we have XYZ catering at gmail.com. I said, okay, well, number one, we got to get that changed to a branded email. Different story. I said, but number two, that Gmail account, so everything going there, how long? He's like, 10 years. And so we looked, and I said, you realize you can export your sent mail from that Gmail? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, because he said he had no database. I'm like, you've got 10 years of back and forth catering questions. That's a pretty good place to mine some data and start using it. Yeah. And I think that's a common issue with restaurants, is the fact that before the pandemic, they had a lot of disconnected roads in the tech world. But even once it came on board, they were all looking for a quick fix to fix this, all these little things that came up because they didn't know they existed. Talk about some of the things you've seen with regards to helping restaurants use data better.
So this is where the data side of things for us actually becomes actually a lot of fun, and it becomes really kind of a different way to look at things. We're trying to sort of disrupt a little bit how restaurants look at data and use information. Now, we don't use it for marketing. We don't use it to help, plan their menu. We don't really use it to do any of those typical types of things. We use it to help improve employee experience. We use it to help measure things like employee workload, lower turnover. We've got all these places that are trying to get creative on how to retain people and how to do things differently. So we help them actually reverse engineer and look at their data differently so they can execute on that. The one that if somebody's heard me on one of these podcasts or, on a different channel before, they might have actually heard me tell this story. We were working with a group a few months ago who they knew they were short-staffed, and they knew they had these, loyal staff members who'd just been working there forever and working so hard to help them kind of get through things. But they're all working 6-7 days a week. They're closing and opening, and they're all over the place, right? Which we're seeing happen in a lot of places. Yep. And one of the executives of that company said, look, we got to do something different. We got to do something that's more exciting and that's cooler and that, people will get excited about. So he said, what if our team never had to clean or do their laundry ever again? What can we do to help? This is an idea to help improve their overall work-life balance. It's not just give them $1 raise kind of thing, right? And so anyways, they decided that they wanted to add 1 hour of at-home cleaning and laundry service for every employee in the whole company, like 300 people.
Damn.
Yeah, right. And
they
so we said, okay, yeah, exactly. So it was intended to be a retention strategy, but I mean, like you just said, it turned into a pretty cool hiring thing, right? And anyway, so our role in that was we helped them basically reverse engineer their whole data package, look at everything from their wage structure to their pricing strategy to how their customer behaved, all these different things, so that we could help them add almost $200,000 a year in extra cost and not lose margin. So awesome. There's been some really fun projects like that it's not just looking at information and saying, hey, we can help you generate sales, which is obviously important, but that's just not our role.
Well, looking at data and helping you understand how you can optimize people's efficiencies in life and everywhere else. I mean, that's we don't have anything like that, but we have on the last Friday of the month now, we do a thing called the money bucket for one part of our company. And the money bucket 2 Fridays ago had $11,750 in it.
Wow.
And like 13 of our employees got to reach in there, and some of them virtually because they were on Zoom, and pull out money. I think one person left with $2,700. And that was like, holy crap. I mean, this is the biggest one we've ever had. But the fact that somebody went home Friday to a spouse and said, hey, look, that's stuff that, other companies aren't doing that we use, and we leverage that to, one, get the attention of potential new people. But also I realized that we've spent a lot of money and time training our current staff how to make them happier and make them, stickier. But in the restaurant space, I can imagine it's even harder, because the last couple of years with the long hours, the people I talked to a restaurant manager recently who said she was hired to be the marketing manager. Then she went to restaurant manager. Then she's taking shifts, and she's like, Matt, I was flipping burgers for 6 months. I quit. That wasn't me. I was there. I was trying to be ride or die. But then all of a sudden, like 5-6 months in, I'm like, okay, I'm out.
100%. Our company tagline is retention is the new cool, right? Trying to make sure that people understand that, there is a labor shortage happening, but we got to make sure that our industry in general is just trying to retain people, because people are, as everybody who's listening right now and throughout the industry knows, is people are questioning whether they want to work in this industry or not anymore. Right. So, retention is so important, but we're trying to make sure that there's some creativity, opportunity and a little bit of fun around that whole, how do you do it differently? And it doesn't mean it has to cost you your margin. Right. Yeah. So there's some fun around it.
Yeah. I just bought 110 copies of the June issue of Entrepreneur Magazine, because in there's an article about Chick-fil-A and a Chick-fil-A franchisee, actually 2 franchisees, and what they did to change their pay structure and some other things years ago. And I bought them because, number one, I think it's a benefit. I want to send it out to some of our top clients and say, hey, here's an article, here's the whole damn magazine, but read this article, because there's things in here that will resonate. And like one thing that resonated with me, I had somebody recently apply to our company, and we're like 46 people, I think right now, our company. Yeah. And we hire about every 2 weeks, we hire somebody, it seems like. And we've only had one person that we've let go of since 2008. So it's pretty good. We've done a really good job of retaining. And the guy asked me about part-time. He's like, are you part-time or full-time? I said, no, we went all full-time now. I said, we had a couple part-timers years ago. And what I found was that the part-time contractors or employees, they've got their mind other places, and they aren't vested, they aren't here. And that was one thing I took from the article, was the guy from the Chick-fil-A location that went with higher wages. He's like, I had to get rid of, there was 40 people that were going away because we were going away from part-time. I wanted people, this was their career, so we could pay them more, give them better benefits, and take that they're having 3 jobs off the table. Yeah, makes sense. And you know what, the paying more thing, I find so often we speak to operators who are, they know they need to pay more. They know that the market is demanding, higher wages or higher salaries depending on the role. But there's this, hesitance to pay more because everybody's worried about margins, obviously, right? Everybody's trying to make sure that, inflation's crazy right now, and people are trying to make sure that, they can still manage their costs. And so, one of the core strategies that we use to try to help negate rising costs and repurpose and some of this stuff is based around measuring
overall business productivity in a restaurant environment, right? So it's kind of like, everybody's heard of things like Six Sigma or the Toyota model or some of those things. We use a very similar metric that allows us to measure that output and productivity in a restaurant environment. And the cool thing about that too is that, sometimes it's about try to maximize what's happening in the business so that, you can negate rising cost. But the cool thing about that metric is that there's a tipping point when it becomes too productive or too much, and all of a sudden it becomes workload management, right? So what we end up doing a lot is helping restaurants understand where that tipping point is, because if you work your people too hard, it affects their employee experience, it affects the morale, and it affects retention.
Yeah.
Right. So there's some really interesting ways that we're finding that clients are trying to take and use information in ways they haven't done before.
I love it. So talk about the labor cost playbook, because I found this via your LinkedIn profile.
Right.
It said, find your 15% profit increase. I'll put the link below, but talk about what people can expect from the labor cost playbook.
Yeah. So that playbook was originally, so going back to 2015, just to build a little bit of context, in Canada in 2015, for those who aren't in Canada that might be listening, there was this sort of race to $15 an hour. Every market was going to $15 an hour as a minimum wage. It didn't matter what position you were, like whether you made tips or not, or what, kitchen front of house, everybody's at $15 an hour. There's no tipped earner wage. And at the time, that was about a 40% increase in minimum wage across the country. So, that's when we sort of originally started working on some of this strategy around how to manage labor cost without raising prices or cutting staff hours. So those were sort of the two, bookends. We're not allowed to raise prices. We're not allowed to cut staff hours. There has to be another way to battle this rising cost. And so it came through that strategy that's based around business productivity, right? Not trying to be efficient, not trying to cut as hard as we can to get as much done with as few people as possible, but actually try to build in a way that will help us, manage the cost better. So the labor cost playbook is basically a spin on that strategy, and it's a digital guide, but it's both, theory type stuff and actual video tutorial at the same time. So we walk people through everything from how to measure it, how to implement things in their business, these metrics, how to actually use that strategy to make sure your budgets are set properly, your targets are right, your people understand it, and ultimately, if people want to, they can use it to lower their labor costs. We usually find 10 to 15% is not that difficult.
Wow. And depending, if I just saw our payroll go through today, and 10 to 15% makes me go, huh. I wonder what's in the playbook that would help a media company.
Right. Well, and you know what? We find that the same type of strategy, this is, we could go down a different rabbit hole here, but it applies in retail, it applies in grocery, the same type of thing. But the cool part about it, and where we find that people appreciate the approach, is that it's not about cutting. We're not trying to look at the payroll dollars and say we have to shrink that number. It's more the relationship between that number and revenue, and how to manage those more, a little bit more responsibly through data.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing that I would imagine has to be something that spins off of when you put things in place like that are in the labor cost playbook. When you put those things in place, when you make employees happier, when you make people, when you retain more people, one thing that I would imagine is that those people are now more likely to boast about where they work when they go home, or they're at a family event and somebody's like, man, how's work? Oh, it's going great, man. I love it. We're doing this. It's this, that person's like, man, I want to be a part of that. And so that's a great recruitment strategy, which wasn't even meant to be a recruitment strategy, but it's a byproduct because you've got people happy about where they're at.
And they don't have to do their laundry.
That's a cool one. I read an article about 6 months ago about a guy who had one of his employees of his restaurant, great employee, been there like 5 years. And he put his notice in, and he was talking about finding out why people are leaving you. And he's like, can we have a conversation? You've been a great employee. What happened? And he said, the bus route changed, and there's no longer where I live at a bus to come here. And he's like, that's why you're quitting? He went and bought him a car. The guy, he goes, I didn't know you have a car. I didn't know you took a bus here every day. And he's like, yeah. He said, he's been doing it for years. But I looked at it, and this guy's a great worker. And to replace him is going to cost me X amount. And also I know he wanted to be here, but he would have never thought to ask for that. And so I think there's a lot of those gaps we can all look at and find. Like I found one in our company. We had a problem where a lot of people weren't taking, we had an unlimited vacation policy and people didn't comprehend what that meant. I'm like, well, you're getting paid 52 weeks a year, regardless. Take off when you want to. And nobody was taking off. And so this year we put in place, we have 2 weeks we're closed, Christmas and Thanksgiving. And then we have 5 weeks we're mandatory each to, we split the company into 2, team A and team B. Like this week is team B's off week. So team B is off this week. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is your week. You're off. You're getting paid. I don't care if you're on a beach trip, go hang out at your damn house.
Yeah.
And we found that that's helped. Like I had employees, one of my employees told me, she's like, when this first thing came up, I thought it was kind of stupid because I don't want to just sit at home. And she's like, that was a very productive week that I got so much done. I had a good time with my kids, but I never would have done that had I not been forced to take off without the policy.
Yeah. And you know what, I think it's important for restaurant operators, well, operators of any business, but restaurant, for sure, that they think about things like that in terms of, okay, let's try this almost like as a case study, right? Let's test it, and there's our industry. I always feel that, we've been very innovative as an industry when it comes to product, when it comes to the design of restaurants, but when it comes to how the businesses are run, we're kind of, notoriously a little bit behind. So, I think it's important to try things. We did a really cool, speaking of case study, we did a really cool one with a group that wanted to they took what was happening in other industries around the whole flex time and work-life balance, hybrid work model, right? That kind of everybody's calling it, part from home, part in the office. And they said, we got to figure out a way that we can do that with our management. But it's such a tough industry because you got to be in the restaurant, on the floor, in the restaurant, in the kitchen. And, so we use the same metrics around, measuring output, productivity, and workload to sort of look at their model a little bit differently. And they ended up actually being able to have their managers, instead of work 5 9-hour shifts, well, scheduled 9, probably working longer, they managed to set it up so that they worked 4.5 days a week. The second half of their 5th day was what they called flex time. And it was, the only 2 rules were that on your flex day, you had to be in the restaurant from noon until 3. Let's cover off lunch service together as a team kind of thing. And then if that was your flex day, the only other rule was you have to leave the restaurant. You have to. You can get admin done. You can work on the schedule. You can hang out with your parents or your friends. You can leave for a long weekend. Do whatever you want. The only rule is you have to leave work. And they actually found that their best people got more productive because they took advantage of the time in a positive way. Like 1 day a month, they would get extra work done and have, more time off the rest of the month. And their bottom performing people actually became less effective because they just took advantage of the time. But the crazy thing was, when we actually went through that process with them, giving people that much extra time to do what they wanted with, it didn't cost them more. Their management costs stayed exactly the same, but their people viewed it as they had more work-life balance. They had a hybrid work model. Their retention improved. So their training costs went down, and, they actually ended up ahead. But it's just, I think it's important we look through a different lens sometimes, and just in terms of how we're operating our industry.
No, I love it. I think that's a huge thing. And is this the best place that people can find you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're pretty, we have a good presence in lots of the social channels, but the website's always the best for sure. And they can find the labor cost playbook on there too, and a few other things, retention strategy wise and that kind of thing.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. BenchmarkSixty.com. You can also check him out on LinkedIn and Instagram. Make sure you go to that URL, the laborcostplaybook.ju.mp, which I like the end of it, the .mp. I like how you broke that up. I'm going to say that's for me. I'm just going to claim that. Make sure you go on there and check that out. I'm going to be digging into it. I'm going to print it out, and I'm going to see how we can put it in place and see what we can do. I appreciate your time. Any parting words?
Just, like I said, just encourage people. Now's the time to look at the industry differently, right? We're in a position where innovation's fun and it's important. So yeah, have fun with it.
Cool. Well, I love it. I appreciate your time today, Jim, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Matt. You too.
Yep. Awesome.
Quick and dirty.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah. Well, I used to take these things when we were doing on Wednesdays. I would find that we would hold up here. What's going on? It didn't end yet. It didn't hit end. There we go. We're still